Hello and welcome to the Writer's Room. I'm your host, Arden Coutts, and joining me for this week's episode to discuss their writing journey and debut novel is author Jay Leigh. Thank you so much for joining me, and I am beyond excited to have you on the podcast today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here too. I've never done anything like this before, so
yay! I am just super stoked to have you on and talk more about your writing process and your recently released debut novel, Whisper into the Night, which I absolutely adore. It is probably one of my favorite books that I've read recently, and just tickled all the right parts of my brain. So I'm a little bit of a fan, having a moment.
I'm a little bit flummoxed.
But it's just it's so good and has all of the pieces of a thriller, romantic thriller, bodyguard type, book that I adore. So yeah, just super excited to have you on. And also wanted to congratulate you. Your debut novel, Whisper into the Night, is doing pretty well. You're up there in rankings and things, and it's
I was
going
surprised
well.
Because I went into it with zero expectations, so that I didn't set myself up for a huge crash of disappointment. So I was expecting 3 friends are gonna buy it, and they're going to tell me it's awesome because they're my friends. But I was very pleasantly surprised by how well it did, because as you know, as an author, you get that imposter syndrome, and you kind of hope that it goes well, but the whole time you're kind of doubting yourself. So to see that it actually hit the way I wanted it to and hoped it would was really, really rewarding in the whole scheme of things.
Yeah, it's been doing, I've been following along, a little bit of a Instagram stalker, and just watching everything unfold and seeing the reviews and just how well received it has been I don't know. As I'm talking, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it, because it's so cool to see someone doing well at something that they enjoy doing and that they love, and it brings me so much joy that I was just yes, Jay, go.
Yeah, it's been really interesting, because I went into this completely blind, and when I first started drafting that book, I was drafting it with the idea that I would query it with agents and try to get an agent and try to go the traditional route. And then at about halfway through the book, I realized that wasn't really the path for me, and that it really wouldn't be a good match for my personality and the goal that I wanted to follow as a writer. So about 50% through the draft, I was no, I'm gonna do myself. I'm gonna do it for me, and I'm gonna go self-publishing. So at that point, it turned into okay, now I have to learn everything there is to know about this thing that I didn't even give 2 thoughts to beforehand. So it was very much a throw spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks, hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and here we are. And it actually worked out. So
when you've done, I'm just sitting here envisioning your Instagram in my head, and it's one of my favorite things, because you've done it so well. It is a piece of artwork.
Thank you.
No joke. I look at your Instagram and I'm just damn, it's so well done. I love it so much.
Everybody loves an aesthetic feed, and that speaks back to I have a background in graphic design.
Oh.
So I, play to your strengths. And I was I can fool around on Photoshop, and I had this vision of, making it work for the genre, making it sort of an experience, branding, because everybody says, oh, be a writer, but then self-publishing comes with so many different hats that you have to wear. So it's not just write a good book, get an editor, it goes so far beyond that, because you have to understand marketing, publicity, branding, selling a product, and you're essentially selling yourself as the product, which I think a lot of indie authors. I mean, authors in general. It's not even just the indie market, because I know a lot of traditionally published authors have to market themselves too, because they just don't have the budget anymore to do a marketing program for every author in a big 5 publishing house.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a unanimous thing that I think authors, when they're going into it, you know, sitting down, writing the book of their heart, you don't think ahead to that marketing angle of how to market a product that means so much to you.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to kind of like extricate that personal aspect. Once it's wrapped and ready to go, you kind of have to take yourself out of it and market it as a product on its own. So that's why I really, like, as I was designing the marketing materials, I was trying to envision, you know, you have to mimic a lot of other ad campaigns. So you have to see what works, like what gets your attention when you're looking at an author's website or an author's Instagram page, and emulate it to a degree while still keeping it personal to your product that you're selling. And, you know, some of it lands, some of it doesn't, and you just kind of pivot and swerve, and you got to be really flexible through the whole process.
Yeah. And I think you brought up a really interesting point, which is like, because you hear different things, like as an indie author or just an author in general, like you said, when it comes to like marketing, right? You have some people that say, just focus on the book, market the book, kind of take yourself out of it, like you said, right? And then you have other folks that are like, oh, but you're the brand, so bring yourself along with the book. And there's like this really fine dance that you have to figure out between the two of them. And that's something I struggle with. Like, I don't know I'm still trying to figure out what that balance is.
Yeah.
And it's a struggle.
I think a lot of it depends on the platform that you're marketing on too, because each social media platform is very much tailored to different personalities. So people who are comfortable selling themselves and being in front of the camera and bringing their personality to it, like they would thrive on a book talk or TikTok or YouTube. And then other people who aren't so comfortable putting themselves out there in a raw and real way, you know, they would be better off with, you know, Twitter or Instagram, where you can have that aesthetic visual platform without having to bear yourself, do a TikTok dance to get sales. Yeah, like, so it depends very much on your personality and what you are comfortable with, because, you know, I'm in my mid-30s. I'm not about to start doing viral TikTok dances and lip sync videos, but, you know, I can do graphic design. So that's where I kind of concentrated my efforts, because you have to play to your strengths, and you have to admit, like, no one person is going to conquer all social media platforms as an advertiser, because there's just not enough time in the day.
Yeah.
Each platform is different. So you have to understand the gears that make it work, and how to go viral, or how to build a community, or, you know, you can't do that for all of them.
I love that phrase. Like, let's go viral. I'm like, oh Lord. Anytime I hear that, I'm like, oh gosh, here we go.
Am I too millennial for this?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I don't have it in my soul or any part of my body to go viral, quote unquote, you know, well, whatever. But yeah, I could literally talk to you about marketing, which I think we may maybe do another episode or something where we can really get into like the nitty gritty of like marketing a book and what goes into it, and, you know, maybe the pros and cons and lessons learned that you've encountered throughout your process. But I wanted to take some time on today's episode to really focus on Whisper into the Night and kind of your process for writing it, because it is your first book. And like I said, it's doing really well, and it was so well written. I teared up when I was reading, like within the first chapter, I was crying, and I was like, what is wrong with me? But you do such a good job, especially in your depiction of anxiety, in this book that it just like it hit me so hard because I was like, oh my God, somebody gets it. Like, like the person writing this book fully understands what it's like to have like anxiety and anxiety attacks. And it just like, it made me feel very seen. And so I was just, like crying within the first couple chapters. And I was like, oh my God, what is happening?
Yeah, I definitely wrote from a place of personal understanding of, having an anxiety disorder, having a panic disorder, also asthma. So like for my first, I've written before. I come from a writing background. I used to ghostwrite for people, but for myself, I've written numerous different fiction works, but this was the first one that I was like, no, I can do this. I can write from start to finish a whole book and finish, actually complete something. So of course, never one to settle for mediocrity. I decided to write the most difficult book that could ever be written. So it's multiple points of view, which I know some people struggle with reading and writing and giving each character a unique voice. And it's a genre blend between like a political thriller and a romance. So I made my own beat sheet, like to combine, the 12 signposts of James Scott Bell with the romancing the beat, and I like meshed both of them together so that I was hitting all of the beats for a political thriller and all of the beats for a romance novel, but they were all like intertwined with each other. And there's 6 points of view, so there's 2 main points of view with the love interests and the main character, and I wanted them to have 50% of the novel is told from their point of view. And then the other 50% flips back and forth between 4 side characters who lend a different lens to what you're seeing and help you follow the political plot line. So it's a book that has a lot of moving parts in it. So it was like a challenge to me because, all right, I'm going to write a book from start to finish and let me just test myself and put everything in the pot and hope that it executes well. And then from there, there's an overarching plot line for the whole series. Each book has its own plot. Each character has his own growth arc. And then there's love stories on top of it. And there's dealing with mental health and trauma and, the healing power of love.
It's so good though. Like so how many, because this is the first book in the Rainbow Brigade series. There we go. Woo. That word's a struggle for me. But this is the first book in it. How many books are you planning for the series?
The Rainbow Brigade series is going to be 6 books, and it's going to follow the love story of 3 pairs. So the first 3 books are the first 3 couples, and then we're going to circle back and revisit each couple for the second half of this plot arc. And then during each 6 books, I wanted the series itself to have a story arc. So you have your rising action, your climax, your conclusion. So the overall plot line, because I just finished writing book 2 and I'm drafting book 3 within the next couple months. So I'm still in that rising action. And then at the end of book 3, we'll hit the kind of overarching midpoint. And then we'll see the last 3, we'll see through to the conclusion. Plus, back to my branding and graphic design, I also wanted all 6 books to make it a rainbow stack.
Yes.
So the covers of each book will have, we started with purple, the next one's blue, and then we're going green. So it'll be a little rainbow stack, and it'll have, landmarks from Washington, D.C. on the cover. Each couple gets their little spotlight on the cover, and I kind of like little secret on the back cover of the paperback. In the first book, there was Molotov Kid. Yeah, he was throwing the Molotov. The second book is going to have a kid carrying a torch. So there's going to be some sort of little plot element of somebody with an incendiary device on the back cover of every book. to kind of keep that genre of the political thriller at the forefront, since the cover very much is a romance novel with the boys hugging on themselves. So I want romance and I want political thriller obvious in the design elements, so that it's no confusion. Because I've had a lot of readers who have gone into it looking for a cut and dry contemporary romance, and they get about 40-50% through, and they're like, I don't want all this other stuff. I just want boys kissing boys. So, it's not the book for them. And I want to make that apparent through the graphics and the imagery and the advertising, that, you're getting more than just a romance with this one.
Yeah, I'm like the opposite. I'm there for like the thriller, suspense, like political intrigue. Like I love that. And then the romance is like the cherry on top. I'm like, glorious. This is wonderful. So knowing that, I thought it was going to be like 3 or 4 books, but knowing that there's going to be 6 makes me so fucking happy. I'm like, yes, bring like all of it. I don't know. I'm a huge fan of your writing, so that makes me super happy.
Thank you.
The more, it means I get to read more.
Yes. And I'm planning, because I didn't want to pigeonhole myself as just a political thriller writer from the beginning, because I know, like, I didn't want to get stuck in that image of only having an audience built on political thrillers. Because I want to write so much more than just political thrillers. So I've planned my release dates where I release one of the political thriller books. I follow it with a different book in a different series. And then we go back to the political thriller, and then I'll do something else. And then I'll keep like weaving it in and out so that I have more to offer. Because like I said, some of the readers were looking for a contemporary romance and did not find that with Whisper Into the Night, because it's not just a contemporary romance. So I followed that up. Once I released that one, the next one on my release schedule is very much a contemporary romance without a political plot line. And it's, dual point of view, first person. It's a whole different entity compared to Whisper, so that I can offer more than just the complicated, thrilling danger aspect of the political thrillers. I could do both.
Ooh, I'm just pumped to read like everything that you put out, and I'm also like super impressed that the amount of work that you're putting out is insane. Like, so how long does it typically take you to write a book from like? Because I know like the editing process and ARC readers and everything that, readers don't necessarily know about, like that takes time.
Yeah, the machinations behind a book. Generally, I have my process worked out. A friend of mine, M.A. Wardell, he says I'm kind of a machine when it comes to it. But I sit with the book idea and I do a lot of the cerebral work of like what I want to achieve with the work. So I'll sit with it for like anywhere from a couple weeks to a month, like just churning things in my head. And then when I have the story like narrowed down enough, I don't use an outline in the traditional sense, but I do use scene cards. So I know how many chapters are going to be in the book before I write it. And each chapter has an objective. So I sit down and I write out what each chapter objective is and what beat that chapter is going to hit in the beginning. So I have a 3x5 whiteboard and I write the 40 boxes on it, and I put each character name at the top and I write what the objective of that chapter is. So like it could be the meet cute, or it could be the deepening desire aspect, or the mirror moment that causes character development. So I write down like where each beat is going to hit in the narrative. And by that point, I have it pretty well ironed out of like, it's like the roadmap of how the book is going to be written. And once I have that roadmap, I can sit down and do the discovery writing part of it for each chapter, because I know what the chapter needs to achieve. So I do a chapter every night, which means I can usually whip out the final manuscript in about 60 days.
Damn.
Planning for stuff because sometimes I just don't have it in me.
That's insane. That is like, I'm so impressed. Like, it's so cool. And do you often work on more than one project at a time, or do you just focus all of your energy on one, finish that, then go to the next?
As far as the writing process, I'm only actively writing one book at a time. But in my downtime when I'm not writing, I'll be making mental notes of like the next book. Because I have this goal of putting out a new release every 2 months.
Wow.
So I have to be planning 6 months in advance of that, so that the manuscript is done, edited, formatted, covers taken care of, and then I have a marketing window to handle the marketing aspect of it instead of just yeeting it into the world like, oh, surprise. So I always have to backtrack my schedule. So like with Whisper, I finished that manuscript, I think in December. I got my editor. They worked on it for about a month. I did the edits. So I had it ready to go, formatted, et cetera, 4 months before it was time to release it. And I did the same with the next book that's coming out, that's checking out. That one was finished probably in, I want to say, February. That manuscript was done, ready to go. And I started handing it to people who wanted to read it. That one's not out till the end of June. The next book I have scheduled to release is in September. That's Illuminate the Night, the sequel to Whisper. That one I finished at the end of last month. So that book is done. It's in my editor's hands. I'm waiting for the final report. People have already started reading it. It's packaged, ready to go. I'm talking with my cover artist now. And, you know, I have the book ready to go. It's finished and it's not coming out till September. So I bought myself that wiggle room by planning in advance. And so I've done the same with I have the next 6 books launch date planned so that I know how far in advance I need to finish the work. So
I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed. I seriously feel like you could like rule the world with your planning abilities. Like, it's so impressive.
We'll crash and burn. Manic episode ends. It could go either way.
I feel like I need some of your planning abilities because I am working on mine and I feel like I'm just like flying by the seat of my pants. Like, yeah, I'll release it. Originally, I was like, I'll release it in August. And then I was talking to my editor and they were like, okay, well, you know, you got this round of edits to do, then you got to do another round of beta readers, and then you got to do another round of edits, and then you got to do this. And so maybe like next year sometime. And I was like, no.
That's like, every time I talk to somebody who, you know, what's the one thing that you would suggest? For me, I work really well under pressurized deadlines. They're self-imposed because it's that whole like, no, you must finish. You must win this deadline. So as long as I pick a date on the calendar far enough in advance where I know I can at least achieve what I'm hoping to achieve in that time period. And from there, I have other deadlines that need to happen before that. So like manuscript must be finished by this date. And I'll even go ahead and say like, okay, editor, I need a slot for this month because I will be finishing the manuscript on this date. So like I already held the next editing slot for the draft. I'm not starting until July 1st. So it puts the pressure on me of like, no, you have to do this because you now have a commitment to see it through. And that way you can move on to the next step. So I'm usually planning a novel in my head, doing the mental work, making brief notes while drafting one, launching another, and marketing the one that's coming up next. So while her was in the marketing period, I was writing, checking out. Checking Out was finished when Whisper launched. And then I started marketing Checking Out while I was writing Illuminate. Now Illuminate is done. I'm finishing up the marketing for Checking Out, and then I can start the marketing for Illuminate while drafting my Mafia book, which is the next one on my desk.
Oh my God, I love it. I'm seriously just like so fucking impressed by what you're doing. Like, you are goals, honestly, for like I just wish I had like a smidgen of your ability to like plan and everything. Oh, and also your writing abilities, which, let's be honest, they're so good. But damn, so impressive. Also, you're telling me all about these books, and I'm like, yes. Let's read those too. Cannot wait for those to come out. Do you ever struggle with like your creative inspiration, I guess, or like where do you get stuck in your books ever, and how do you get out of that?
One thing I've noticed about myself, having done this a couple times now, almost always I hit the 50% mark in drafting, and I begin to doubt everything that I've written so far. And I have to stop writing at the 50% mark, and I go back to the beginning and I read through the first 50% that I wrote, and I'll do like minor line edits or like pick up, I'll see what sort of plot hooks I dropped in. I'll note things that could be themes. Like, I'm big on mirroring things throughout the book so that you can kind of get that callback to the beginning, and something that seemed insignificant in the first couple chapters suddenly becomes a thematic element or a symbolic element as the book wraps up. So I find like I hit that wall at the 50% mark, and I have to go back to the beginning and sort of refresh my memory, refresh the creative, like, where was I going with this? And is this really a great idea? And because like I'm 50-50 a plotter pantser mix, because like while my outlining method looks very strict and like formulaic almost, it's usually just like a one word thing, like chapter 2, meet cute. And that's all it is. That's my outline. Like that's all there is on my outline. And so it looks like it's a super strict, like 1 through 40 of every single element that I want to hit. But inside each chapter is a lot of room for just letting the words flow. And then I go back at the 50% mark and I read through everything, and I'll say like that element has hit a couple times every time we're in that point of view chapter. So let me take that and run with it for the rest of the book. So like once I hit that wall at 50%, I refresh myself. I get back into the beginning. I remind myself of the little things that kind of cropped up during the discovery writing process, and then I'll take it and I'll run with it through the end. And then like the 75 to 80% mark is like, that's where it's set. I know where I'm going. It is like the fireworks, the crescendo, the happy ever after. It's all coming together, and I zip through the last, usually like 20,000 words, pretty strong, and like I know where we were. I know how we got here, and I know how to wrap it up and bring it all together. And I'm usually feeling pretty satisfied with the work once I hit the end. But it's like that 50% mark where it's like, all right, I did the first half of the climb. I'm at the top of the mountain. I'm not sure I can keep going. And then I have to go back and sit with it for a minute, and then I can like slide down the hill.
Yeah, take a breather and gather and then go.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And that's something I had talked to a writer before, Wendy Zuccarello, and she had mentioned that when she writes, like the characters just like, she lets them take her where they're going to take her. And at the time I didn't fully understand what she meant by that, but like, I'm finding that that's how I write now, is like when the characters, they just speak for themselves and you just let the words go.
Yeah.
And because I've tried to do planning, I've tried to like plot things out. I've tried to use like software that's available to like build an outline, and it just like doesn't work for me. But just sitting down and like putting on some tunes and just like letting the words come, that's like the only way I can write.
That's like, I need the framework so that I don't write 10,000 words of a self-indulgent book ever make it onto the page. So I need a rail, or like I need a fence within which I can write. So that's why I loosely understand, what's going to happen at the midpoint, what's going to happen at 75%, what's going to happen in the last 10%. Like, I have an idea of where the story is going to end up. And then it's within each step of the way, I let the characters do kind of what they feel like and bring themselves to fruition in an organic way, while still keeping them roughly within the guideline of like where I need them to go. But even then, some of them end up taking, like, I've had a couple side characters that are becoming more than side characters at this point. They just let themselves come out and they end up becoming something that people want to know more about.
Yes. Gotta love it when that happens. I'm also curious as to, because I find this really interesting, but do you consume the type of content that you write, or are you like completely opposite of?
I am a rabid consumer of the genre I write, because I think one of the best pieces of writing advice that I've ever heard is, if you want to be a good writer, you have to be a prolific reader. So when I am not writing, like I, for example, the month of June, I just wrapped a manuscript. I'm currently marketing a manuscript. I have another one on the horizon. So I forced myself to take this whole month off from writing. I was going to not write a single draft at all during the month of June, because I had a lot of books that have come out over the last 6 months that I have been desperate to read and just didn't have the time. And one of my favorite things to do is to pick up, like, I write gay romance. That's what I write. So it's a hot genre. Everybody's constantly releasing things in that genre. And that's how I discovered my love of writing, is through reading these books that were just like everything for me. And I would devour them in one sitting, and I loved what this author did, and I loved how this character worked out. I loved this plot element. And I also use it as a way of, like, if a book didn't hit right for me, why? I have to, like, I read as a writer. I'll identify, like, okay, why didn't this book resonate with me, and how would I have done it differently? Or, why did this book resonate so deeply, and how can I emulate that in my own works? Because I personally found this arc or this element or this personality very appealing, and what about it was so appealing? Like, was it the emotions that were tapped into? Was it the growth of the character? So I read for pleasure, but then I also read to study these other authors who, I aspire to write some of the things that they write, because it's just spellbinding literary works. And, like, how did they do it?
Yeah.
So I'll see what worked for them. I'll make it my own. I'll use it as a stepping stone to learn more about the craft of writing, or, because when I'm not reading gay romance stories, I read craft writing books. So James Scott Bell, Wayland, I even read Stephen King's craft of writing book. Like, if it's out there, I read it. If it works for me, I buy a paperback copy and I mark it all up. If it didn't work for me, I figure out why that writing tip didn't work for me, or what about it didn't sit right. So I study the craft of writing, and I consume the writing of others to adding to the arsenal, so that I can sit down and create something that I'm proud of and I'm proud to put out in the world.
What was it about was there a moment where you were just like, yes, I'm going to do political suspense, like thrillers? Did you have an aha moment, or did it just kind of naturally form itself.
I've always been a fan of political media in general. So like movies with a political element, or like that spy thrillers or procedurals, like Criminal Minds, the TV series. I love the psychology behind it and like exploring what makes a flawed human choose one path over another. And I've always been drawn to that, you know, Law and Order procedurals, Criminal Minds, these television dramas with all of this huge cast of characters that all have their personal and professional arcs. So that was always something that appealed to me. And then I think it was like late last summer, I found Tal Bauer's work.
Yes.
And he wrote the Executive Office series. So it was everything I didn't know I was missing in a work of literature. So it was the president and his Secret Service agent. And there was the completely over the top, extreme, dramatic plot line with these political characters. And it was like an international, like, race to see
so good.
the world. It was everything. I was so hooked. I read all 3 books. And then I read the supplementary works, and I read all of them in like 4 days. I was up 4 o'clock in the morning, sleep for a few hours, pick it up again, read, and I finished the whole Executive Office series within a handful of days. Tal Bauer is an absolute poet when it comes to writing.
So good.
It was a series that literally, like you said, ticked every single box, and I didn't even know that was my first foray into reading political thrillers, because I never picked up, you know, James Patterson or anything like that. For me, it wasn't what I was looking for, because I need that healthy dose of romance.
Yes.
In the political, and a lot of the political, if you go type in political thriller, you get a bunch of beefy jock dudes saving the world, and then like damsel. So that wasn't my thing. Never was into that. But when I found the Executive Office series, it was the emotions, the falling in love, plus the danger, and the I'll burn the world for you. And then there was these huge, impossible to beat villains, and these unlikely people were joining together and fighting the good fight. And it was everything. And it was so over the top. It was so over the top. I mean, anybody who's read that book, that series, by the end, you've got nuclear warheads, submarine fights, and the Arctic Circle, and there's fucking icebergs. And it's like, it is completely over the top.
Oh, it's so good, though. It's so good, though.
So gripping. Like, you know what? You could do anything right now. I mean, a dragon could come out of the fucking ground, and I would still be hooked on this.
Yes. Oh, my God. I freaking love Tal Bauer. And his other series, what is it, like, with the
FBI guys?
Yes.
The Murder Between Us and The Grave Between Us.
Yes.
That was so good.
So good. I read those first, and then found the rest of his books, and I was like, holy shit. This is amazing.
Executive Power duet with the president and his astronaut lover.
Yes.
He has the Night Before and the Secret Service book.
Yep.
So we had the judge with the marshal who was protected. So it was
was such a good one too.
Everything he writes is so good. Like, I really want him. Like, he just put out another contemporary romance, and I loved it. It was so good. It was like poetic and emotional and pining, so much pining. But I'm really, really keeping my fingers crossed for him to go back to his political roots and his procedural roots with the FBI agents, because I love that element of, like, you have these dudes, they're very much in traditional male roles of like bodyguards, Secret Service, lawyer, FBI agent, you know, it's a very traditional role, but then they're tapping into these emotions and they're falling head over heels in love with another guy, and they're still like being kick-ass and taking over the world, but also being like just
cute,
the sweetest
and romantic
ever. Yes, I love the duology of like understanding the male gaze and like stripping back some of that toxic masculinity and saying it's okay to embrace your emotions. It's okay to be a romantic, soft person who wants to have somebody to come home to at night and hug and kiss and be soft and vulnerable with. Like the vulnerability, I think, of it is what I like about gay romance.
Yes.
Because men in America have to hold on to this role of being strong, being cold, being untouchable, being the powerful leader, the alpha male, and it removes the agency of experiencing the full breadth of human emotion, being vulnerable. So I've always found gay romance appealing because it gives back the agency to men to be okay with being vulnerable, being emotional, being soft, not having to be the alpha that saves the day. Like they can be raw and real and have emotions.
I love that. You broke that down like so well. Could never have said that in as well as you did. But I think that's what I love about it so much too. Because I'm really into like K-dramas and Korean culture and K-pop. And part of the reason why is because there is like skinship between men is fine. Like that is part of their culture. So you have a lot of affection shown through touch in Korean culture. And I love it so much because I'm like, it's okay to show that affection between two people, two men, and it's perfectly fine. And so I think that's why I'm drawn so much to gay romance as well, or MM romance or whatever. It's because you get that affection.
It shows the full breadth of a human experience without being trapped in the idea of what a man is supposed to be, which we know through science has been detrimental to dynamics in relationships, dynamics in, not just romantic relations, but familial relationships, platonic relationships. There's always this burden of being a man's man, especially in American culture, because we seem to have strayed from understanding that it's okay and normal and natural to seek comfort and be raw and be vulnerable. Like there's this machismo culture. Like, no, you have to be strong. You can't cry. You can't show emotion. You have to be the strong provider. And that's been so detrimental to how things are working in American culture now. And you find, people are more willing to embrace the idea of a bromance now as we're moving away from that generational restriction. And they're saying, no, it's okay for men to go to therapy. It's okay for men to have feelings and talk about them. It's okay for men to stick up for themselves and say, no, I want to be a baker. I want to make clothes. I want to
step outside of those
boxes.
The gender norms
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, this is a whole other conversation we could get into, I feel like, for hours. But I do want to touch on, before we go, I wanted to touch on your books that you have coming out, because you have 2 that are coming out soon, right? You got one at the end of this month and then one in September.
Yeah.
Can you, so by the time this podcast comes out, your one book will be out and the other one will be on the way. So can you share a little bit about those works?
One? Yes. So the one that's coming up imminently is Checking Out, which is book 1 in the City Boys Never Sleep series. So that is, it's a little bit of like a Cinderella story, but I'll be honest, the inspiration behind it was like, what if I did a sexy adult retelling of City Mouse, Country Mouse? So you have the shy country guy who gets thrust into this world of glitz and glamour and wealth and excess, and he's like a total fish out of water. And he comes crashing into a bizarre relationship with a city boy French expat who has just a huge attitude problem. Cute. And it's the two of them learning to deal with trauma, because they each have trauma that they're dealing with in different ways. So, Shiloh, he has abandonment issues and childhood, a history of childhood abuse and struggling with a learning disability. And he's never been in the city before. He's never been outside of these small sheltered country towns, and he's never had money to play around with. He was very much raised in poverty. Mm-hmm. And he comes crashing into this new life, and he's thrown completely off his rocker. Like, he has no way of coping, but the trauma that he was raised with comes back with a vengeance. And it's sort of showing, that if you don't deal with traumatic experiences from your past, they come back to haunt you. And Trey, his love interest, is also dealing with a history of abandonment, but he copes with it in a different way by falling into addiction to self-medicate and deal with his depression and unhealed trauma. So the two of them are on this growth arc of dealing with their traumas, learning how to live with these traumatic experiences. Because as we know, healing is not linear, and trauma doesn't just go away because you said, I love you. So it's them learning how to be whole and love themselves while also falling in love with another.
Oh my God. I can't wait.
That against the backdrop of New York City, because I'm obsessed with that. And I love the whole juxtaposition of glitz and glamour and the Broadway lights. But, underneath the glitz and glamour, it's a cutthroat world where people are in fierce competition to make it, and most don't. So it's that dark and light, night and day glow of Broadway, but it's hiding these darker elements that, aren't as glitzy and glamorous as one look at New York City would show you. So that was kind of fun. The second book coming out is Illuminate the Night, which is the sequel to Whisper.
Yes.
I very much enjoyed writing that. It was the first time I actually wrote a distinct sequel in a series of works that need to be read in order of appearance. So it was really great to, especially also the format helps because it's multi-point of view again. So I'm following the same format as Whisper with the main couple and then the side characters. And one of the side characters is Connor. So we still get to see the continued growth of his relationship with Theo. We still get to see Theo in recovery from the traumatic experience that he had in Whisper without giving, spoilers away. So he went through a lot in that book, and he's still again, I like to follow that theme of healing is not a linear process with an end post. It's a continual exercise in adjustment. So he's still adjusting to living with that traumatic experience. We still get to see his mom as one of the side characters. Not a lot of people like her. I don't know if they will, but she's there. Love her or hate her. See her flawed humanity and her, often bad decision making. So, she's sympathetic in that she is a human who often makes mistakes.
Yes.
But also she doesn't make herself very many friends with those mistakes.
No, she does not.
That's still a continued story. We still have the same political group that is a threat to everyone. So we see all those elements from book one still continuing through book two. But we also get to see Elias and his assistant Caleb fall in love with each other and become a big happy family with their, little Parker, Elias kid. So there's like the single dad element, the boss employee element, the age gap. So you still get those juicy romance stuff plus the rest of the stuff that's carrying through the series. And then in that book, I introduce Taz, who was Theo's ex from book 1.
Yes.
Taz is a point of view character in book 2.
No way. Oh, yeah. Yes.
I love him. I can't wait because he's one of those side characters that became a character in his own right. So he got a point of view in book 2, and book 3 is actually about him and his love story. So I'm really excited about that one. That one's coming out in January.
Oh my God. I wish listeners could see my face because I'm like, I've got the biggest, dumbest smile on my face. Like the entire time you've been talking, I'm like, yes, I cannot wait for either of these books. I'm so excited to read them, especially, oh my God, like, oh, yes, I can't wait. I cannot wait.
All the books.
All the books. I have too many to read. I don't know where to start. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to more of I'm going to try to say it again, the Rainbow Brigade. I think I got it that time. And then the new series, what was it? The City Boys?
City Boys Never Sleep.
City Boys Never Sleep. Yes.
Yeah, play on the city that never sleeps. So.
Oh, it's going to be so good.
Yeah.
I wanted to know also something I'm starting with the podcast is recommendations. Do you have a book, a movie, a song that just like you have to recommend?
I will say I watched The Night Agent on Netflix.
Yes.
Right before I started drafting Illuminate, which is a political thriller. And I loved it. I watched the whole entire season in one sitting. Like I was up till 4:30 in the morning. My son was coming down at like dawn. He's like, "Are you still here?" And then, if you will, he's 11, but he's a mature 11. So I was like, well, you might like this series. So I gave him my Netflix and he ended up watching the whole thing also. So he really loved it. So it's political, it's thrilling. There is a romance. Mm-hmm. It's a subplot. I wouldn't call it like equal parts romance. Yeah. But you get to see the Secret Service. You get to see the Chief of Staff. You get to see the FBI. And that's like literally what I write. It's all of those things. So I absolutely loved it. It was well done, super thrilling, edge of your seat, adventure and action. So I would highly recommend anybody who's into, thriller, adventure.
Yes.
That's definitely one of the good ones. It pairs well with Taubauer's Executive Office series, which I will recommend to anybody ever.
Always.
It's the number one go-to.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. The Night Agent. Oh man. Such a good one. I did the same thing. I watched like the entire series in one setting and I was like, yes, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. And then I got the book and I haven't read the book yet, but it's in my Kindle. So one day I will read it.
And then I saw an advertisement for The Diplomat also on Netflix. And that's an American diplomat going to, I believe, the United Kingdom. And there's like political, but like lots of lust and danger and like more of a cerebral psychological, less bombs and guns, but still like it looked pretty good. I have it on my queue to watch. So
that's another look at that one.
Like similar with the political and the international aspect to the politics. So
I don't think I have seen advertisements for that one yet. So I might have to jump on Netflix and check it out.
Yeah, it's called The Diplomat. The main character is a female diplomat and she's going to overseas to do her diplomatic work. So yeah, it looked pretty good. Looked like it had a lot of spicy scenes in it. So
nice. I'm gonna have to check that one out.
We love it.
Love it. Oh my gosh. So Jay, I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast. And I am insanely excited to have you on again.
Yeah.
If you're willing.
Totally. This was fun.
And I think maybe we'll do a podcast with Jay and M.A. Wardell and myself, and that'll be amazing. So cannot wait for that.
My best friend ever. You know, they always say find a tribe, and he's my ride or die in the writing world. So that would be amazing.
I seriously think between the two of you, you could like conquer the world with writing. Like your process, the way you're organized, like your voice. It really, y'all could do everything. It's truly amazing. And so where can people follow or find you on the internet? I
mostly stick with Instagram, but you can find me across most social media platforms under JL_M. I'm sure you're going to put that in the comments somewhere so that you can find that. AuthorJayLeigh.com. But like I said, I'm mostly on Instagram. That's my wheelhouse. You know, feel free to hit me up in the DMs because I love hanging out with people and talking books. So
yeah, and I will most definitely include Jay's contact information in the episode description, and I would highly recommend everybody check out their Instagram because it is, like I said, it is a work of art. It's gorgeous. I can't get enough of it. It's so beautiful and just entertaining. Like the stuff you share is like just the right amount of information to like get people hooked and like coming back. So
I've somehow used my entire Spotify liked list because I try to always put a song with the post that's like evocative of the theme of the story. And I was scrolling through today and I was like, oh, that's my favorite song. That's my favorite song. That's my favorite song. So it's like an immersive experience now if you click the volume.
I love it. It's immersive artwork. It really is. It's so fantastic.
Sensory experience.
But yeah, I can't thank you again for being on, and I look forward to chatting with you again.
Likewise.
And listeners, please go check out Jay's information, Instagram, website, all of the above. Read. You have to read Whisper into the Night. It's fucking fantastic. And I again, want to thank Jay, and listeners, I want to thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you have questions or comments, you can email me at funfriendspodcast@gmail.com or DM me on Instagram at funwithfriendspodcast, and I will answer your questions on a future episode of the podcast. If you have questions for Jay, you can hit them up in the DMs on Instagram. And be sure to like, rate, and review the podcast. I appreciate it. With that, get out there, try something new, and have some fun. Bye. Bye.